Central Christian Central Sulawesi Christian Church from Sulawesi Tengah, and I really interested join this class because I want to learn much about how human rights in the perspective of in religion, and also how religion see the human rights and both of. And I think it is very helpful for me because my research is about ecology. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Effie. Next, oh, actually, there's Sister Ines below Effie, please. Because your name starts with Y, so yeah. Oh, you change your name? No. Okay, please. We don't hear you. Well, yeah, I think we don't hear you. Maybe there's a problem with your audio, because I don't see that you are muted, but we don't hear you. Okay, it seems like it's okay now. Okay, well, let's go to others now, and then we'll come back to you, Sister Ines. Okay, Mas Sabar, please, next. Where is Sabar? Yeah.
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Can we see you?
All right. But sometimes it's getting trouble, sir, the connection. Okay, I will try.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you see me now, sir?
Yes, very clearly.
Thank you. All right. So I need to introduce myself.
Yeah, and why? Yeah, what do you think about religion and human rights? What is your perception, your anticipation, expectation?
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. So, hello, everyone. Some of them, of course, we already know each other. But for someone who I just already knew, welcome to our class. So, my name is Muhammad Sabar Prihatin. You can just call me Sabar or Passion. And I think why then I chose the subject of human religion and human rights. Currently, I am actually still trying to try to understand better about the human right, especially for religious people. What kind of right actually religious people can get, and what can human rights support religious people to be a better human, to be like someone who cannot be discriminated, especially for the religion that they embrace, something like that. And actually, I also, after learning about human rights issues for citizenship, and it also include for the human right for religious person, it's kind of something that I would like to make as a tool for interreligious dialogue. So I think this subject will be very helpful for me for my own project with my another organization. Then I think that again, yeah, this will be very help me to enrich my knowledge, to enrich my understanding the diversity of the religion, as well as the right of the religious people in terms of to be part of the global citizen, I guess. And I expect that the material will be talking much about how then human rights can support people as a believer to be seen equal with anyone else, even the atheism, I guess. Probably that's what motivates me to take this subject. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Next, who is next in the list? Rabiatul Adawiyah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you speak louder so we
Hello?
can hear you better?
Hello? Hello?
Yeah. Yes.
Can you
Go
hear
ahead.
me? Okay.
Yes.
I'm so I'm so sorry because I'm on my way and from this course I expect that oh okay, I'm so sorry. I'm Rabetul Adawiyah, and what I expect from this course is about how religions can make the people get their right, and what kind of the religion uh, uh, get the right from other that's a minority and always gets discriminate. Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Well, I think I just met you now. Probably you were not in my classes before. Is that right?
Yes, it's the
Okay.
first time.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So that's good. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Um, okay, Ofa. Hello, Ofa.
You're still muted.
Hmm?
I think Ofa is still muted.
Yeah. Hello, Ofa. Where are you? Okay. Now she's gone. Okay, we go first to Nurdin, and after that I'll go back to Ofa or Malika. Okay, Nurdin first, please.
Yeah, hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, good.
Okay, well, my name is Nurdin. I live in Bima, West Nusa Tenggara Province. And things that come to my mind when I choose this course is that how the human rights, how people can embrace any religion that they want, and they get protection from the legal institution by the law. So I want to see how the freedom of religions or belief in Indonesia especially and all around the globe. So I will have a broader context or more understand how the human rights or free to embrace any religions in around the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nurdin. Ofa, are you okay now? Can you speak?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can
okay,
you
good.
hear?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I'm Alpha. I'm from CRCS, and we have already know each other. I think when I think about human right and religion, I think between human right and religion has connection each other, because I think all the religion give like freedom, and also give like a doctrine to honor each other. But because we are very diverse in this world, and also there are many religion, so I think the human right, or the under Declaration of Human Rights, it's very important to speak in terms of religion. I think that's all my thought. And also why I choose this course, because I have planned to write the thesis related to the religion, and also freedom of religion. Thank you. That's all.
Yeah, your plan thesis, freedom of religion in a specific case, or?
Actually, I don't have any specific case, but like I think that will be interesting and that will be important if I write about the thesis of religious freedom in terms of maybe for now I just think about minority religion in Indonesia or
Okay.
the violation by the name of religion.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Next, Umbu.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Zain. My name is Krisarianto Umbudeta. You can call me Umbu. Um, I'm taking this class because I want to know more about human rights and um, especially the issue of freedom of religion and belief. As we know that in Indonesia, in its religious governance, there are issue of discrimination and exclusion. So I want to see how human rights or the concept of freedom of religion and belief could be helpful in trying to be more inclusive in terms of the religious governance. And also there are some issues like the limitation of human rights or freedom of religion and belief because there are issue like it's hard to accommodate more religious community. And uh, I think I want to learn more about it, how to like to make it more inclusive, as always being taught in CRCS that being critical about any definition, any categorization, any conception about anything, who makes it, who are included and who are excluded in such conception. So that's what I want to get from this class. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Umbu. Ihsan. And after that, Harry.
Yeah, thank you for the chance. You can call me Ihsan, and I'm from Garut, West Java. I take this class because I curious the conception and really want to try focus on the consolidation or relation between world religion people and indigenous people. So this class will help me to understand more deeply. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Ihsan. Harry.
Okay, thank you, Zain. My name is Suheri. You can call me Harry. I have two reasons to join this course. The first thing, because in the second semester, I write about the interreligious with atheism. And in this course, I think I will develop this understanding with the human right issue. And the second one, I think I very interesting to looking about how human right discuss with warfare, something like that. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Haris, please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Haris Fakwa. I am from Jogja originally. And what I expect from this course is I want to see how religion and human rights should complement each other. Because as far as I'm concerned, currently religions sometimes violate human rights. I mean, quote unquote, in the name of religions, they violate human rights. So I also want to see how the FORB, freedom of religious belief concept, can cover the freedom of all people to embrace any religion, not just major religion, but it's also the majority religion, but yeah, the main religions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Fanny.
Yeah, thank you, sir. My name is Fanny. This is my I'm still in my first year in CRCS. The reason why I take this course is because the human rights always intersect with many aspects of life, and it's for me it's very essential to understand the concept of human rights as the fundamental for issues related to the lives of many people, including in the religious aspect. And I have learned about human rights actually in my undergrad, and I really enjoyed the course. And I hope that I can broaden my, and that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vani. Next, who is next? I don't see it here. Who is Dian?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dian Nurining Tias, but because here in my class have two Dian, so you
Didin.
can call me Didin. Yeah, yeah. Okay. And then why I take this class, because I want to improve my knowledge about the relation between the religion and the human rights, and because I believe and I want to know more about how religion can be used to fight for human rights, and also how to create. In my opinion, is human right can be very useful to create a more peaceful world. And that's the first. And the second, because I in my thesis I want to write about the how to teach tolerance in post-conflict area, and also because tolerance is the one of the one of the important thing when we're talking about the democracy. So that's why I choose this. That's why I choose. I take this class. Thank you, Pak Zain and friends.
Yeah. I think before I miss Daniel and Gary, because it seems like well, Gary, can you speak? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Zain. I'm Gary Nelwan. I'm from UKDW Yogyakarta. Or I'm from to join the because I never.
Well, Gary, sorry, Gary. I think your voice is breaking up. Maybe you can switch off your video so we have better sound quality.
Okay. Thank you. I'm joined in the class because
Okay,
I
better.
think human rights is a never-ending effort, including in Indonesia. Then I'm interested to see to what extent religion helps the achievement of human rights. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Gary is from theology faculty at UKDW, master students. Daniel, I think you're still in the train, are you? Okay, I'm not sure Daniel gets me. I'd like to go back to Sister Ines, Bu Yohana. Are you okay now? Can you speak? Okay, well,
Actually, Sister Ines already said that in the text box, but so we can also read her introduction there in the chat box.
oh, okay. Yeah, okay. So the introduction is in the chat box. What makes religion as part of human rights cannot be enjoyed by everyone, particularly in Indonesia. What can I do as a citizen to promote religious freedom? Okay, yeah, thank you. So I think everyone. Oh, Nando, I don't. Did you speak? I think you were gone for some time. Are you?
Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
Faizan. Okay, I joined and took this class because I think this material related to the humanity. So I want to know maybe from the religious perspective, we have learned more about the humanity. So in this class, I want to know more about the humanity from the perspective of legal constitution and human rights.
Okay. Yeah, actually there are still a few. Bagas, Akar Bagaspati, and then Dian Kurnia
Yeah, hello,
after that.
Paulus.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Hello, Paulus. My name is Akar Bagaspati, and you can call me Bagas. So why I take this course is because I want to know more about what the causes of human rights violation in the name of religion. In the example of Sharia law, which applies also to adherents of other religions besides Islam and make them as normal citizenships. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Dian Kurnia.
Yeah, thank you, President. Do you hear the voice? Okay.
Well, we don't hear you, Dian. Okay. Yeah,
It's better.
good. Yes.
My name is Dian. I choose this course because it is this issue of the human right is related the religion freedom in Indonesia, especially how the uh, religious freedom of indigenous people, and it is a very kind of the problem in Indonesia that in indigenous people have faced from the discrimination the name of human rights. Thank you, Pak Zen.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who has not spoken? I think everyone has spoken except Danielle. I don't know whether Danielle, can you hear me? I saw you said you're on the train. So, okay. So yeah, I mean from the from your what you have described, you have covered many ground, which I will cover in this semester. So to summarize, I see at least two big issues. First of all, the position of religion to human rights, or the relation, I mean the relation between human rights and religion. So either one, whether religion supports human rights. One of you mentioned that. And there is therefore, I think, and then I think Didin mentioned how religion can be used to fight for human rights. And then, so there is an assumption here that human rights is a good thing. Okay, so you want to support that. You want to use religion for that. But as Umbu says, we always try to be critical. So we will also be critical toward human rights to some extent, in order to understand what actually is human rights. So when we say that human rights is a good thing, why is it good? What are the characteristics? What are the features? Are there things which it promises but it cannot fulfill, for example. And then in terms of religion, whether religions always support human rights, or can religion be critical? Certain types of religion would also resist human rights. So there is a variety of the relations between human rights and religion. When certain types of religion resist human rights, for example, why? What is the alternative provided? So that kind of question. And then another big topic you mentioned several times here is more specifically related to freedom of religion or belief. And then you mention, for example, particular attentions given to minority religions, and then to indigenous religions, to atheism. Do atheists have rights, have their own freedom of religion or belief? So that kind of questions. And then discrimination. Are certain groups or people, persons discriminated because of certain laws or certain policies? So these two big issues we will discuss in our class. So the structure, if you have seen the syllabus, the structure is basically I divide the class into three main groups of issues or clusters. First of all, on human rights, looking at the history, the philosophy of human rights, and then certain issues like universalism, which is one of the central issues in human rights. And then the second cluster is about freedom of religion or belief. What is freedom of religion or belief? So human rights consists of many rights. Rights to freedom of religion or belief is only one of them. But since our class is on religion and human rights, then it is also an important part of when we speak about religion and human rights. So we will speak about what are the norms in terms of freedom of religion or belief. Can they be limited? How can they be limited? What considerations can limit freedom? And then what is the relations between the rights to freedom of religion or belief and the rights to other things? Like, for example, freedom of expressions, women's rights, children's rights. So there are different rights. May they be conflicting with each other? And then another more specific issue is about the politics of religious freedom. This goes back again to the critical question: is human rights are all good? Is freedom of religion are all good? Is there a politics of religious freedom? And when you speak of politics, who benefits from certain politics of religious freedom? Are there attempts to politicize religious freedom? Are there certain inherent limitations within the idea of freedom of religion? When there is the mentions of freedom of religion or belief, there is already two terms here: religion, belief. What is religion? What is belief? Who defines religion? Who defines belief? And what are the consequences of that definition? If a state defines religion, what are the consequences of that definition? Would certain religious groups, if they are not acknowledged by the government, would they enjoy freedom of religion? This goes back again to the question whether freedom of religion is something universal. what does universal mean? Does that mean that everyone can enjoy it? Everyone should enjoy it? What about is it only a matter of law? That is that certain laws protect or guarantee freedom, or is it also about power relations in society? Would that affect how certain groups enjoy religious freedom? So that kind of issues. And well, I have, probably I'll show you my slides now. I'll go quickly. But one of the things which I found in the previous classes is that sometimes CRCS students have difficulty in this class because, like I said, this class tends to be more legal and not many of you have legal background. So you have to adjust the way you think about it. But I want to say once again that in our discussion, it's not only, well, the legal characteristic or the legal dimension is very important, but it's not limited to the legal dimension. And one of the first things I will go, I will show you later about the, well, probably I don't need to show you Google Classroom, but if there's any question, you can raise later. But well, in all of our classes on religion and something, religion and ecology, religion and whatever, religion and gender, etc., we almost always start with the question about what religion is. Since your first day at CRCS, that question about what is religion already comes up. The importance, of course, is not how do you define religion, but what are the consequences of a particular understanding of religion. I will go over this very quickly as a kind of introduction, because I think most of you are already, I mean, well understood this problematic. So we know that when we speak about religion, we can understand it as teachings, as doctrines, as texts, law, as persons in their everyday life, as communities, as movements. And then I will introduce another term later when I quote an author, political theologies, in which theology and politics are combined. So in all of this, first we have many dimensions. We have many religions. Within each religions, there is also always diversity. So diversity of religions and diversity within religions. So the question whether religions support human rights, for example, in a sense, it is a meaningless question, because you have to specify which religion. I will give an example later. Conservative religion, progressive religion, conservative Islam, fundamentalist Christians, etc. So things, there is this diversity which we need to understand to make sense of the relation between religion and human rights. And then what makes it even more problematic, we spoke about definition, that state policies and institutions may define religion. We know this. I mean, again, since the first semester, you have looked at how certain power define religion, whether that power is state power or religious power. I mean, the dominant, the majority religious authority, for example, which tries to define religion and thus to define also who deviates, etc. So if certain state policies, institution may define religion, does certain conceptions of human rights or freedom of religion define religion. And when I say define religion, that may mean constrain religion, restrict religion, or construct religion. So freedom of religion has an aura of giving freedom to religion. But what does it want to free? It's freeing what from what? For example, when you speak about freedom of religion. So this kind of complicated issues, which depends on partly on how do you understand religion. So I have to, I just stop about religion here because I think you understand that. But now, what is human rights? How do you understand human rights? And human rights may mean many things. I mentioned earlier about the legal perspective. In the mass media, for example, news speak about violation of human rights. What does it mean when someone says that certain rights are violated? When you say that, for example, Nando's rights are violated, what do I say about Nando? What do I say about the party which violate his rights? Why don't I use characterizations like unjust? X is unjust. When I say that X who violates Nando's rights, can I say that party as unjust or as immoral, etc.? What is the difference between these terms? What does violating human rights mean? Again, you may understand it narrowly in legal dimension, but well, I ask you to read Universal Declarations of Human Rights, and when you read Universal Declarations of Human Rights, it starts with speaking about human dignity, about justice, about peace. So it's a more fundamental terms, more fundamental values. When we speak about human rights as law, we can speak about international law. We can speak about certain documents ratified by states, like Indonesia, for example, ratifying many human rights documents. I will show you later. We can also speak about domestic laws. So in this course, our starting point is Universal Declarations of Human Rights. There may be many conceptions of human rights, but we are more specific when we speak about human rights. We mostly refers to Universal Declarations of Human Rights, and then after that there are other documents, conventions, covenants, etc. So it's important for you to read Universal Declarations of Human Rights. You know that. I'm sure you heard about UDHR or DUHAM, Deklarasi Universal Hak Asasi Manusia. It's not a long document. It's a document created in 1948, and I hope you read the whole thing about this document, only a few pages. I'm not going to speak about the history of human rights because that will be the topic for the day after tomorrow on Thursday. So now I have uploaded actually a video by Brett Scharf, who will be speaking with you on Thursday. So that's about the history of Universal Declarations of Human Rights. Look at that video, it's 1 hour. It's actually a video from last year, which I think is very good. And in addition to that, there is also a documentary, I think 50 minutes on the making of Universal Declarations of Human Rights. I give you the link in the Google Classroom. Please also watch that. That is also very interesting. It shows you the main figures in the declarations of human rights. So again, our starting point is there. We like I said, there are critical standpoints also when we speak about history of human rights, for example, history of universal UDHR. There are actually also different versions and different interpretations of the history. What actually happened? Why is now universal, why is now human rights as understood in 1948 become something which is really global, dominating, or some people would even say hegemonic? This become a very central values adopted by many states. So documents or values about human dignity, justice, and peace are, they exist in many places, in many different traditions, in many cultures, in many religions. Why is this one specific document, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, become that global? Even if you want to question the term universal, at least we have to understand this is now global, international, and you cannot escape from Universal Declarations of Human Rights because states are members of United Nations. They are bound by this. And Indonesia, for example, I will show you later, ratify many human rights instruments. So, and Indonesia are bound with that. When there are certain violations within this country, if it reached to a certain point, then it can be brought to the international forum, international fora. So human rights, as we understand it, it consists of treatises, institutions. There are institutions. There are, like, for example, what is it called? The Council of Human Rights, or Human Rights Council in the UN. There are norms. There are derivative texts from the Universal Declaration, covenants, and others. There are also mechanisms. How do states are evaluated in terms of their fulfillment of certain rights? So in Indonesia, for example, we can claim that in our 1945 constitutions, we already have human rights. There is also a mention of freedom of religion. But in the amended constitution, when it was amended in the year 2000, you can see, look again, if you have not looked at your own constitution, Undang-Undang Dasar, you have to look at it, and you will find in the amended constitutions the whole chapter with the title HAM, Hak Asasi Manusia, which is very much influenced by the notion of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, by the international human rights. So in a sense, it's not quote unquote Indonesian. It draw as its inspirations from other, from other sources, but then it is also part of Indonesia because it's part of the law. We also have human rights law in 1999. We ratify many international human rights conventions. And when you ratify certain human rights conventions, like, for example, so I have this here, the list of human rights conventions which are ratified by Indonesia. For example, CEDAW is about women's rights. So when this convention, and then CCPR is civil and political rights, and then International Convention on economic, social, and cultural rights. when these are ratified by Indonesia, actually it has become Indonesian law. It has become undang-undang. Okay, so it has become part of Indonesia. You cannot say it's Western anymore, for example. Well, it has its origins in an external source, the international human rights law, but it has become part of Indonesia. So, but questions like this come up again and again. So now I said earlier, in my experience from last year's classes, one difficulty of CRCS students to understand human rights is to understand what is it a species of? What is it? What is this animal? I mean, binatang apa ini? Makhluk apa ini? Human rights. Is it simply documents? Is it a movement? How can we compare that? So the question, to what should we compare Universal Human Rights Project? It becomes important to understand, to locate human rights. So I take here one literature which I find interesting and may be helpful for you. I will show it later, by Boaventura de Sousa Santos. He writes a book with the title is provocative. If God were a human rights activist. So if God is a human rights activist, what would he, she, or it do? Would he support human rights? Would he resist it? So this question, it's interesting. So if you read the book, I will upload the book later. He calls that human rights, he uses many terms, but one of the terms he uses is that human rights is a normative conceptions of human dignity. Sometimes he also calls it, with a rather strange term, a grammar of human dignity. So a system of norms on human dignity, a conception of human dignity, or a grammar of human dignity. So if human rights is a normative conception of human dignity, are there other normative conceptions? What is it in competition with, or how can we compare it with? He compared it with what he calls as political theologies, but also socialism, nationalism, etc., as normative systems or movements for emancipation. So he understands the Universal Human Rights Project as a movement for emancipation. So the goal is emancipation, is to uphold human dignity. Now, there are other movements, including nationalism, fighting to get independence from the colonial power, for example, socialism, or theology of liberation in Latin America, the Latin liberation theology, for example. It also aims for emancipation. It also aims to uphold human dignity. So in a sense, it's a rival of human rights as social movement projects. And then there's a question, how do these different conceptions of human dignity relate with each other? And then you also have, this is the example from Santos, Christian fundamentalism, which has its own idea about a good life, about human dignity, about liberating people from ignorance, etc. It is also a political theology. And then there is also a variety of Islamic movement, whether that's conservative, progressive. There is also a kind of Islamic liberation of theology. Why do you have to use, for example, the language of human rights and not the language of liberation theology when you fight for something? What is the positive of using this, and or the negative of using that, or the other alternatives? So Santos, he asked this question when he attended World Social Forums, and he has a book actually. He wrote World Social Forums, and he saw that many participants in the World Social Forum. This is a forum for yeah, different kinds of social movements all around the world. They meet in World Social Forums in, well, I would say this is in a sense to balance World Economic Forum. So World Economic Forum is dominated by the big companies, capitalists, etc. And then the World Social Forum is a forum for the social movements. So when Santos attended World Social Forums, he wondered that many of the people there who attended World Social Forum, actually they don't use the language of human rights. They use their own more particular language, whether it's liberation theology or indigenous sovereignty. So about local culture. So these are ideas or normative conceptions which are not universal. They don't claim to be universal. They are very local. So actually, there are alternative language to human rights. Now, the question then, how do you relate these different normative conceptions? Well, even among people who are very critical to human rights, there is a realization that you cannot escape from human rights today. It's there. It's part of how the world works now. It's part of national laws in most states, part of international law, so you cannot escape from it. It's there. But then one way for Santos to make sense of this is to understand that in a sense that human rights is everywhere, that you cannot escape it. You can say that human rights is hegemonic in neutral term or negative term. It may be both. But some political theologies, either that's liberation theology, Islamic liberation theology, or certain Islamic movement, Islamic fundamentalism, the idea of Islamic State, or certain Christian fundamentalism, it may also be hegemonic authoritarian. They may resist human rights because they have their own ideas, and they want to well, they are hegemonic also. They may be authoritarian. But then he says that there are actually alternatives, a non-hegemonic or even counter-hegemonic understanding of human rights. And if you understand it in that way, then progressive theologies actually may work together with counter-hegemonic understanding of human rights. So I go one more slides. This is the cover of Santos' book. And I take a quote here, not from Santos himself, but from the preface of the book. The hermeneutic engagement with dominant contemporary world religions, which represent for Santos the clearest alternatives to human rights. So these are alternatives to human rights. And some people put them in oppositions to each other. Religion is resisting human rights, for example. But the hermeneutic engagement with dominant contemporary world religions shows them, the religions, to be a surprising potential source of radical energy toward counter-hegemonic human rights struggles. So religion can be energy, the source of energy for human rights struggles. In a sense, even while upholding human rights, doing struggles based on human rights, the energy can come from religions. And in this book, If God Were a Human Rights Activist, Santos shows how religion can be the source of energy of human rights. Well, in our introduction, I think a few of you mentioned how religion may support human rights, or how religion can be used to support human rights. For Santos, yes, religion can be a source of radical energy, source of energy to support human rights struggles, but the progressive religion, the progressive political theology who can do that. And when they do that, they speak about human rights, not in its hegemonic understanding, but in a counter-hegemonic understanding of human rights. What is it? What is the progressive theology? What is the counter-hegemonic human rights? Well, if you're interested, you can read this book. I will take up again this book later when we discuss about universalism versus particularism. But I am showing it now because, again, like I said, it helps us to understand how should we position human rights. If we have to draw a map of different systems, for example, how do we understand where human rights are? Makhluk apa ini human rights? Binatang apa? Bagaimana kita memperlakukan itu? So when we compare it with other social movement, which may have its inspirations from religions or other ideology, other belief systems, then you can see how do you locate human rights. And of course, there may be certain contradictions or tensions. Like when you speak, well, many CRCS students are now familiar with the indigenous religion or indigenous communities. The values of the indigenous communities are, in a sense, local. They are very much tied to their own geography, their own forests, mountain, etc. Their own claim to be universal, actually. How do you put them in relations with human rights, which claim to be universal? Would then universal human rights above the local indigenous normative systems? How can we relate the two? There is also now well, the indigenous movement now, they are also using rights language, rights-based perspectives, but that is relatively something new. But it's one of the interesting topics which you may want to take up. So okay, moving next to the other cluster of this course. So previously I show how religion may be related to human rights. That's one of the agenda that we want to see here. Another cluster of issues is related to a specific rights, which are religious rights. The freedom to have, choose. So among the universal human rights is the freedom to have, choose, change, or live, practice, or manifest a religion or belief. So this is among religion, among rights related to religion. But then again, there may be tension here. From the perspective of a particular religious community, I think any particular religious community, they would not like their members who choose to change their religion. In other words, leave the community. So would religions support freedom of religion, which may include the right to change or to leave a particular religion. How can religion understand this? What kind of religion or what kind of religious interpretations may support this or resist this, etc. And then also there is the right to protection from coercion, from discrimination, rights for parents, for children concerning religion and belief, rights to conscientious objection, that you may be exempted from following certain regulations or law based on your belief. So this is part of the freedom, the idea of the freedom of religion or belief, which we will discuss later. So I will jump to certain topics which we may discuss to some extent, but I think I have to be realistic that there are many topics and we cannot cover all of them in this course, but I just mentioned it. So even starting from today, you may think about what project in this course you may want to pursue, either for your midterm assignment or your final assignment later. So one popular question which I mentioned earlier is about compatibility. Does religion help or hinder fulfillment of human rights? I say this is an instrumental or functionalist question because it looks at religion mostly as an instrument. Whether as an instrument it helps, whether we can use religion to achieve human rights, whether religions is in tension with human rights or not. What about the religious values of UDHR? Some people say that actually Universal Declarations of Human Rights, well, it does not mention anything about, it does not based on a particular religion. It is actually very religious. Many religions can find the aspirations for peace, justice, human dignity as their own as well. And then there are also, we may do philosophical, theological examinations of the concepts in human rights. What is human in human rights? Is the human in human rights universal? Are all humans the same? Of course, I mean, the claim in Universal Declarations of Human Rights is that all humans are born equal. They have equal rights. Well, they may be born equal, but they don't live equally. In time, there is power relations, power distinctions, etc., hierarchy. So not all humans, they enjoy equal rights. How do we understand them? What is the conceptions of the human in human rights? And then also, what is the conceptions of rights? Why do we speak of rights and not obligations or responsibilities? Many religions speaks more about responsibilities or obligations, not about rights. So how do we understand rights? And then the philosophical and theological justifications of human rights. In the third class next week, we will meet Toro Lindong, and his topic will be on philosophical and theological justifications of human rights. This is also related to what I mentioned earlier in Boaventura Santos. There are progressive theologies, there are conservative theologies, there are exclusive theologies. Which ones are in line with human rights, which one resist human rights, etc. And then I'll give you just as a few examples. First of all, if you want to write your paper, you may want to write on certain cases, like for example, you mentioned the atheist. What is the status of atheism in Indonesia as a legal case? Is atheism allowed in Indonesia? What about Baha'i? What about Ahmadiyya? What about other religious minority? What about indigenous religion? Does it have a place in freedom of religion, or is there a certain definition of religion which exclude them? Is there a privilege given to the minority, or what if it? How do we understand it? So you may want to write your paper also by taking a particular case and then analyze it using available conceptions and laws in Indonesia, or ICCPR, which has been ratified in Indonesia, etc. And then another big literature or genre is anthropology of human rights and politics of human rights. I will touch on this here and there, but it's really a huge literature now. For example, just to give you some examples in terms of anthropology of human rights, it is interesting to speak about anthropology and human rights, because before the Universal Human Rights Declaration was made official in 1948, the Associations of American Anthropologists, they issued a statement which basically they are skeptical of the universal claims of UDHR, of the Universal Declarations of Human Rights. Well, you know, anthropology deals with the local, with the particulars, and now there is a universal claim here. So they become very critical. So if you go with the anthropology, many of the works in anthropology of human rights, they are critical, but also they try to see how understanding a particular local culture help us also to understand how human rights work. Human rights may be universal, but human rights does not work universally. Like, for example, the one here, the book below, Rights After Wrongs, Local Knowledge and Human Rights in Zimbabwe. What is the relation between local knowledge and human rights? This is also an interesting topic. In this book looks at Zimbabwe, and it speaks about how local knowledge may be in tensions or in contention with the claims of universal human rights, which are brought by United Nations agency, by NGOs, etc. And how do it work in Zimbabwe? So that's a very interesting issue. The book above it, Surrendering to Utopia, the subtitle is actually an anthropology of human rights. It speaks again about how the claim of universality of human rights work in reality, in practice, works in the local context. Of course, you can repeat this kind of research, well, in Indonesia or in other places. The other book, which I showed here, Beyond Religious Freedom, it's written by Elizabeth Shackman-Hurt, who comes from the discipline of international relations. So it looks at the politics of religion, or the politics of religious freedom, how the notion of religious freedom has been used in, well, to use Santos' term, in a hegemonic way by big countries like US. US invaded Iraq, for example, partly in the name of human rights. When it came to Afghanistan, partly the claim is to save the women, to give women their rights. So this book is critical to that kind of claim. And it speaks about beyond religious freedom. What is beyond religious freedom? We will discuss this book later in my session on politics of religious freedom. We will discuss this book, but also criticisms of this critical genre. There are many critics of human rights, of religious freedom, but there are also now a literature which is critical to that critical literature. The other book I put here is about freedom of expression in Islam. This is another topic which we may not take up much in this class, but if you're interested, you can of course take up this issue. This book, it was only published a few weeks ago. One of the editors is Lena Larsen, who will be speaking also in our class from Norway. It's about apostasy and blasphemy laws, which are two big issues when you speak about freedom of religion in Muslim communities. So those are some of the examples. Like I said, these are well, a kind of introduction. I give you a survey. I hope I give you also a map, some ideas about what kind of topics you can take up for your project. Maybe you'll be interested to do your thesis on issues related to freedom of religion, to one of the topics I mentioned earlier. But this is a field which is really, this is a big field. And as I said, it's a multidisciplinary fields. Legal literature on human rights, on freedom of religion, that's huge. And then also the politics of human rights, the anthropology of human rights, etc. The relation between freedom of religion with particular communities like indigenous religions community or Baha'i community, Ahmadiyya, etc. There is also possible topics for your project. So I'll stop here. If you have questions or ideas, comments, please. And Arum, please also, if you want to add more.
Sure, Pak Zen. So before you come up with the questions, I think I need to add some more, but I'm sorry for taking more of your time because the class need to be ended at 10:30. But just to
yeah, about the time, the official time is 3 hours, right? So, but we will not going to meet every week for that long. Because I will assign you to watch videos of lectures, etc. But since this is the first class, I think we can go up to 11 to hear also your comments.
Thank you, Pak Zain. So before I come into my comment, I just want to remind you that we already have the WhatsApp group by Harry. Thank you, Harry. So you can also add Pak Zain there because he has not been there yet. And then, of course, you can check the WhatsApp group after the class ends. So do not need to have the urgency to see it now. But I've shared the book that Pak Zain recommend, the If God Were Human Rights Activist, there in the group, and also the syllabus. So if you look at the syllabus, don't forget to read it. Who are the lectures on each class, on each schedule, and then the course evaluations, the weekly pre-class assignment, midterm assignment, and the final paper as well. Don't forget about that. And that's just the technicalities. I think I will be speaking more when on the 1st July with Pak Zain talking about the normative core institutions on religious freedom or freedom of religions, I believe. But because this is the first meeting, I just want to give you a glimpse of interesting topic or theme that you might be consider for your final paper writing. So as Pak Zain said before, I'm coming from a law faculty, the law school, so legal scholar. But then when I joined CRCS, actually even before that, because I had one of my master degree actually focusing on the political science, and there I learned beyond the legal framework of human rights. But Pak Zain helped me a lot to understand what I now use as my theoretical framework in my PhD thesis, that is religion making. So religion making is a very interesting concept that usually being used in religious study or sociology that I introduce now in legal science, legal studies, because it helps us to explain the politics of lawmaking. So we have the UDHR. No, I'm not going to talk about UDHR. Let's talk about the ICCPR, or in the Indonesian context, let's talk about the Pak Zain mentioned the human rights articles or chapters in the Constitution. We have the human rights law or blasphemy law, marriage law, and other laws that related to the issue of religion and religious freedom. So actually, my thesis talking a lot about how these laws were made in a political sphere, and that's issue is covered by the idea of religion making. That religion is being constructed. Well, there are many types of how religion making is done. One of them is religion making from above. That the discourse, the descriptions, the constructions of religion is constructed by the state or by the government. And I try to describe how the process happened in Indonesia. So one of the interesting topic is about the official religion. So you may heard it a lot that Indonesia has 6 or 5 official religions, right? Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, and now you add Confucianism as well. Actually, my thesis finding is that there is no legal document say that we have an official religion. It only stated in the explanations of the blasphemy law, and even the explanation is not a legal norm. And I have a lot to say about that, but we will talk about that on the 1st of July. But just to give you a glimpse that all of this relation, constructions or definitions of relation in Indonesia is very politically constructed. In 1973, the government created GBHN, TAP MPR, which is higher than the law. It's under the constitution at the time, and it says that religion and belief, kepercayaan, are two equal different things. But in 1978, with the politics, the new GBHN, the new TAP MPR says that belief or kepercayaan should not be an equal entity to religion. It should be a sub or chop or an entity inside religion, and it should not be a religion. And more interestingly, that in 1978 as well, the government separate these two terms, religion and belief. That religion will be constructed under or regulated or managed by the Minister of Religion, but belief or kepercayaan is managed under the Ministry of Culture. And this also the political work of the government to limit the evolutions of belief that they want to be in the equal positions as religion back in 1978. And then you hear this issue of Confucianism that was banned by Suharto, 1967, and then Gus Dur back in 2000 reclaimed that Confucianism is now allowed to exist again in Indonesia. And then you have this case of the KTP, the religion of the traditional believer should not be allowed to mention in the KTP. And then in 2017, the Constitutional Court decided that yes, you can now say it, but all of the name of the traditional belief, kepercayaan lokal, should be uniformly said kepercayaan terhadap Tuhan Yang Maha Esa. And in my thesis, I said that it is still a discriminatory matter, and also prove that the Constitutional Court does not understand the meaning of a belief. If we look at the international laws, the term belief, ICCPR, actually is defined very broadly. It includes theistic and non-theistic beliefs. So one of you are concerning about what about the rights of atheism, let's say. If we use the international constructions of belief, it should include that. But if we look at the Indonesian constitutions, let's say Article 29, Paragraph 1, this is a very interesting debate because it says Indonesia is based on the one and only God. So the state proclaimed itself as a monotheistic state, not just theistic, but monotheistic state. So it creates even more problem. What about the absence of godism in Buddhism? What about the plural, the lot of gods in Hinduism? And what about the animism and dynamism and other ism that actually not, or well, it is not belief in one and only God? And then you also can ask, what is the meaning of the one and only God? Is it quantitative meaning or qualitative meaning? this is an interesting study. And also, yeah, the issue of the traditional belief in Indonesia, kepercayaan lokal, we have our, me and Pak Zen say that we have this Ancuism, if you know Mas Ancu, our director in CRCS, he also wrote a lot about that. So this is one of the issues that can be approached using legal framework. So I really encourage you, even though you have no legal background, but please study with me. We can discuss a lot about this to enrich your study furthermore. Thank you, Pak Zain.
Yeah, thank you, Arum. Oh, okay, I realize I don't put my video on. Yeah, thank you, Arum, for further introduction to interesting topics in religion and human rights. So please, if any of you wants to, if you have questions or whatever, again, this is the first class. So many of the topics we mentioned will come up later. We'll have more time for discussion, but yeah, anything you have questions of about the Google Classrooms as well, syllabus, assignment, whatever, please.
May I, Azin?
Yes, of course, Umbu, please.
Yeah, so I want to ask about the introduction of this class. So my question is related to I want to know the underlying perspective of human rights, because as indicated in its terminology, it is human rights. So when we read the contents of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it is so much focusing on human, but we know that in the first semester, for example, when we discuss about religion and ecology, we know that it is like from Latour, we know that it is modernity that bring us to think separately, dividedly, so as if things are separated. And the challenges is how to raise the sense of being interconnected. So it is about interconnectedness. And then also we know that when we discuss about citizenship, there is also an interesting topic about ecological citizenship, because there is an awareness that we cannot just guarantee the recognition or the citizenship of human without guaranteeing their rights relating to ecological discourse. For example, when we talk about indigenous religion, we cannot just recognize them as human, but still exploit their land, for example, because they can only be religious when they could relate with their land, for example. In Pak Zain slide about freedom of religion and belief, there is a point about protection from discrimination in matters of religion or belief. But then how religion being understood here? Because we know that for indigenous religion, again, they only could be religious when they could relate to their land, and it is has been a huge challenges in Indonesia, for example, and in global context actually, about how we guarantee the rights of these people. So there is an assumption or presumption for me that actually we couldn't divide human the matter of human with the matter of ecology, especially when we talk about indigenous religion. So how you see this this point? And then my second question is related to the terms religion and belief. So I want to know if maybe Pak Zain or Mbak Arum could give explanation about could we compare the way Indonesia make the distinction about religion, about agama and kepercayaan, with that of in the global context, how they make the distinction between religion and belief, because I'm not really sure if what we Indonesian mean by kepercayaan refers to the same thing that belief refers to. So maybe that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, excellent questions, both of them. I'm sure Arum can respond to the second question well, because it is also part of her dissertation. But for the first question, we speak about human rights, the rights of humans. But for some people, well, if I rephrase your statements, they can only be fully humans when they are in relation with their nature. They can be religious when they are also in relations with their environment. So two answers to that. First, indeed, it is actually, well, this is a more specific answer if we relate that with the notion of freedom of religion. So only one right, there is the right to freedom of religion or belief. Actually, one of the criticisms of the notion of religious freedom is exactly on that point. That is, for example, well, I wrote a review of the book Beyond Religious Freedom. You can find it in CRCS website. It is a review of Elizabeth Schachman's Hurt, Beyond Religious Freedom. And one of the criticism she raises is that destruction of forests, for example, in certain places, it actually affect one's religion, but it is not registered as violations of freedom of religion or belief. That is the weakness of the conceptions of freedom of religion or belief, which focuses on individual rights of religious persons. I think Umbu left or disconnected. Is that right? Are you still there? Oh yeah, you're still there. So you can say it is one of the criticism that I mean, discriminations of certain religious community is registered as violations of freedom of religion, but destruction of Amazonian forests, which makes the indigenous people, along with all their tradition, their religion, their beliefs, gone. It is not registered as violations of freedom of religion or belief. How do we deal with this? That's Elizabeth Schachman-Hurt's question. We can speak about the interrelation between rights. That freedom of religion is one right, and it is always related to other rights. So we can analyze that in terms of interrelations between rights. But again, that is one question which I will not answer fully now, but just to acknowledge that it is an issue. My second answer is, well, you are right. I mean, in 1948, I think there's not much awareness about environment, about the relation between humans and its environment and nature. So the focus is really on persons, and not only persons, individual persons, not on groups, communities, etc., which may share certain characteristics like the Adat communities. So the emphasis in human rights is again on the individual rights. And this is also one point which Boaventura Santos, in the book which I mentioned earlier, he also takes up this issue. And he says that a counter-hegemonic human rights may be enriched by the perspective of certain political theologies, which have more strength in dealing with communal issues, with the issues of relation between humans and nature, etc. So it may be complemented by certain progressive theologies. I will also show you, well, this is a slide which I skipped actually because I did not want to take much time, but this may help you. Although Arum criticized this, and you can say your criticism, but as a typology, it may be helpful, although then we will have to make some qualification. So some scholars, and last year Arum let me know it's Karel Fasak, make this what is it, categorizations of rights. The three generations of
factor was generation, but that was what I read back for him. Generation, generasi.
The generations of rights, the three generations of rights, right? The first is the civil and political. This includes freedom of expressions, freedom of religion, and one covenant which is very much about it is ICCPR, International Covenant, International Convention for Civil, on Civil and Political Rights. So civil and political. The other ones is on economic, social, cultural, and there is another convention, International Conventions on social, economic, social, cultural rights. There is actually a question why there are these two separate human rights conventions. Well, later you will learn also what is the meaning by what is meant by conventions, for example. But why are there two separate international conventions? It is partly, I think, if you look at the history of human rights, the formulations of human rights, it partly also reflects the well, the tensions between the allies, forces and Russia, China, etc. The Western world, the winner of the Second World War, they put emphasis on civil and political rights. Well, in the discussion, the Russia, China, and a few other countries, they put more emphasis on economic, social, cultural rights. So partly it is a reflection of history, but then, like I said, there is also the discussions about interrelation between rights, that when you see one particular issue, like for example, the discriminations of the Shia community in Madura, it is not only an issue, a civil and political issue, an issue about freedom of religion or freedom of association, but it is also an issue of it is an economic, social issue. It is an issue about employment. It is an issue about right to education, which the state should fulfill. So in the first categories, the state actually should not prohibit or should not limit. You have freedom. The state should not prohibit that. The state should not limit that. But in this second types of rights, the state should be active. In the first one, the state should not be active in doing things. It should stay away because people already have their freedom. The state should make sure that everyone gets the freedom. But in the second one, the state should be actively fulfilling the rights. And these are the economic, social rights. But then in later discussion, there is more awareness, for example, about development, about environment, that these are also rights. So discussion about environment enters in, for example, the Millennium Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals. There, the idea of development, which is an attempt to fulfill the economic, social, cultural rights, it should not be separate from considerations of environmental sustainability. But in my understanding, again, if you speak about human rights, then the main attentions is on individual persons. And this individuality is an issue in itself, because like I said, religions, adat communities, etc., they put more emphasis on the communal stuff. So how do we understand that between individual rights and communal rights? That is another issue which may come up also later in our discussion. Arum, please, if you want to continue, especially about the second. Yeah.
Thank you, Pak Zain. Well, I have comments for all of the three issues. The first issue on the human rights and then human and rights. And actually, this is part of my master thesis that I just discussed with Pak Zain a few days ago. So I took one of my masters in political science, and the title of my thesis, my master thesis, was Humanizing Human Rights Education. And why I took that title, because I look at the way we teach human rights at the law school, at the Faculty of Law, that we emphasize the rights, not the human. So in law school, if you have a Bachelor of Law, usually we approach human rights from a legal document. So what are the rights that stated in the laws, and you just focus on those particular rights, not on the human. So if you ever heard about the case of Nenek Mina, she was considered to be she was under the law. She was guilty for stealing a fruit because the law said so. So law does not consider the human conditions of someone. It just say that whoever you are, I don't want to see your background, because the Justicia Goddess, where the law is blinded, because they should not consider the subjectivity aspect of the human being. Just see what the documents say. This is your rights, this is your obligation, and that's it. So I want to change the paradigm of human rights teaching from focusing on the right to focusing on the human. So Pak Zain and Brad Sharf, tomorrow you can ask him on Thursday, has this very interesting project of human dignity. So if you look at the on the UDHR, the spirit of brotherhood and human dignity is the very sense of human rights. So we actually have to humanizing how we understand human rights again, that it needs to shift the focus from the rights to the human itself. And there is actually the critique of legal positivism. But I'm not going to talk about it deeply, because it requires many legal term, many technicalities, but we can discuss that on the 1st of July. The second one, on kepercayaan and agama, I will have to share my screen to, yeah. So I make, this is the only table I have in my thesis. The comparison between the conceptions of religions and belief from the ICCPR and the Indonesian law. So the term belief in the ICCPR, in the General Comment 22.2, it says that ICCPR protects theistic, that's what I just said before, non-theistic, meaning atheism is there as well as the right not to profess any religions or beliefs. So you can have non-religious belief. But in the Indonesian law, the term belief is limited to believe in one and only God, as stated in the state ideology Pancasila, Article 29, paragraph 1 of the Indonesian Constitution, proclaiming the state to be based on the one and only God. But I must say that there are lots of theistic states, right? If you go to Scandinavia, all of those countries having cross in the flag. It reflects the theistic notions of the kingdom or the state there, Norway, Sweden, and so on. But they still protect human rights. they still protect religious freedom of the minority, even though Norway, I spent 4 years there, even though Norway is a Christian state, but they still acknowledge and protects the rights of the minorities, Islam and so on. So what I want to say is, even if you say that Indonesia is based on the theistic state, but this should not be used to justify any violations, any discriminations to minority rights, including, if you are interested, the theistic and atheistic. So a lot of people say that because of Article 29, paragraph 1, atheism should not be exist in Indonesia. I say it should. Why? Because if you look at Article 28E 28E, paragraph 1 of the Constitution, it said that the Constitution protects every kind of belief. So I have a very, I don't know if you could say it's philosophical discussions that I say the state cannot have belief because state is not human being. State is an institution. And if you claim a particular state to have religion, it will, I mean, we're not homogeneous. I mean, if we say that Indonesia is Islam, it is not Indonesia, but the government there. So, of course, it's just my mind thinking about that. But uh, I have a very interesting conversation with Pak Zain about Article 28 28E dengan 29, because Article 28E protects religious freedom, faith, belief, and so on. But this is the product of the reformation of the amendment. Pak Zain said that it borrowed the concept from the international laws, from ICCPR and so on, that it included in our constitution in the year 2000. But still, it is already in our constitution. The wording there is the freedom of religion or religious freedom or whatever you might call it. It's a human rights chapter. But if you look at Article 29, it is still the product of the 1945, and the wording is different. The wording is kemerdekaan. But of course, it's related to the situation back in 1945. But what interesting again is that Article 28E, paragraph 1 and paragraph 2, 28E ayat 1 dan 28E 2 itu membedakan. 28E paragraph 1 talk about religion, and 28E paragraph 2 talk about kepercayaan. So is there a meaning that even after reformasi in the year 2000, we still consider belief as something not religious equal? Or because of that, we should see that as two equal different things. And that was so interesting. And about religion, in the ICCPR, it says religion is not limited in its application to traditional religions or to religions and belief with institutional characteristic or practices. Analogs to those traditional religions, new established religions or belief, or religions and belief that represent religious minorities are also covered. It's a very broad term. But the Indonesian law, this is what I critique the most, that even the Constitutional Court, the government, the DPR, says that we have formal or official religions. I said no, because it says the elucidation. So legally speaking, elucidations or the explanations of the law is not a legal norms. And if you read the elucidations of the blasphemy law, it never states that the 6 religions mentioned there are the official religion. It only says that religions adhered by most Indonesian. Agama yang dianut oleh sebagian besar penduduk Indonesia. It never says about official religion. So that's my comment on the second issues. And on the third issues, just a very short comment on Karel Vasak, Generations of Human Rights. So Karel Vasak was the judge at the European Court of Human Rights, and I think it was in the 1960s to commemorate the establishment of the ICCPR and the ICRCS. I think, sorry, I forgot about 1966, if I'm not mistaken, was being established by the UN. And then he made a very famous speech about this generations of human rights, that actually talking about which rights should be prioritized, or which rights that in the first generation, and then yeah, I would say it's prioritizing rights. According to him, the first generations of human rights is the ICCPR, the civil and political rights, and then the second generations of rights is the economic and social and cultural rights, and then the third generation is the solidarity rights, the environmental rights, and so on. So I criticized this writing because if we look at the political constructions in the Europe back then, 1960s, with the Cold War, and socialism or communism was actually seen as the bad guy at that time. So if you look at the constructions of civil and political rights, as Zen already mentioned, the so-called negative rights, so state need to be as far as possible. State need to not interfere. We have the freedom to do anything in the social and political rights. So state should not interfere. You should be free to exercise. That is the construction. So state just need to keep you safe to do whatever you want to do in the social and political rights. So to religion and to election, for example. So this is actually the essence of liberalism. In the liberal constructions, everyone should be free to do something until then you disturb or harming other. If you read John Stuart Mill, for example, so you are free. The state need to make sure that you are free to do your rights. The other constructions is the social, economic, and cultural rights that the state need to give you something to fulfill, to actively do something. And that's what we call the positive rights. And this is close to the socialism idea that state need to manage the people. So state, of course, got the money from the people, from taxation, for example, but then state need to fulfill the education need, the healthcare, and so on. So state need to do something, not just taking itself and then let the people exercise, such as what we do in the civil and political rights. So these two rights, Pak Zen already explains, are two completely different things from different paradigm, that it should not be digenerasikan. Karena kedua-duanya itu penting. But I can understand why Karel Vasak thinks that ICCPR is the first generation or the first need to be prioritized, because if he at the time in the 1966, 1968 says that ECOSOC rights is more important, he will be seen as a communist. And that was not a very popular idea as a European Court of Human Rights judge at the time in the Cold War. So I think I add more of complexity here, Pak Zen, but I hope that it will be a good brainstorming for the students to think about the paper. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Arum. But are there any questions again? Actually, I would also like to hear from you. I mean, from these 2 hours of introduction, what is in your mind now? Has the introduction sparked a light in your mind? Made you imagine of new things, or did you find it boring? Too many law, etc., or too legal, or whatever? So what is your impression?
Zain, may I?
Yes, Sister Ines, please.
I still close my video to make the connection a little bit more stable. There are 2 things, but learning the 3 generation of right, it is consoling. There is a sign of evolution in our human understanding, in our understanding about rights, about human rights. And there is a progress, a form of evolution in it. I'm glad to see this. And the second, listening to Pak Zain and also Mbak Arum, and also the question of Umbu, then I remember James Scott books, Seeing Like a State. There is a tendency of simplify the complexity of the reality. So perhaps there is this is behind of the reasons why the government does this or that to simplify. So for example, to separate humans from rights, that's to simplify, to make it easy to regulate and to control. It doesn't mean just try to connect with James Scott book, Seeing Like a State. Interesting, awesome. Thank you very much, Mbak Arum and Pak Zain.
Yeah, I think The first point is important. I mean, the evolution of human rights. So human rights is not something finished. It has a history and it is still evolving. New interpretations, new instruments are still being created. Well, actually, if you speak about freedom of religion or belief, it is still, I mean, in the phase of development until now. If you speak about studying freedom of religion, new books about freedom of religion are still being published. So there is no standard. And yeah, so it is evolving. Okay, other comments or questions?
Can I ask
Yeah,
a question?
please, Fanny.
I see that in this discussion we talk much about legal stuff and law, and then I wonder that how we scholars that write stuff about human rights and religion in the terms of textual to shift it into the actual, like as we don't learn about law and legal stuff, so how to shift this textual into the actual practical to implement the human rights in outside the academic sphere.
Yeah, well, again, first of all, of course, I said there's many legal stuff here, but it's not only legal. Arum also spoke about that earlier. There will be the philosophical issue, the theological, political, anthropological, etc. And then secondly, if I understand your question correctly, probably I'll just give you an example from a research that we are doing now, including myself with Arum. We are now working with the Ahmadiyya community, looking at regulations, local regulations issued by governor, by bupati, etc., which limits the activities of the Ahmadiyya community. So from this regulation, I mean, from this research actually into the regulation, we may do legal analysis to reach a conclusion about what is allowed and what is not allowed, what limits the freedom, the activities of the Ahmadi, and as such it violates their rights, and what is not, what is the objective of the limitations, etc. Of course, this is related, this is relevant very much with the day-to-day life of the Ahmadis. Like, for example, they want to pray in their mosque, but then their mosque was destroyed, and then they want to renovate their mosque, but it is not allowed. So they cannot pray in their mosque. Some of them cannot even go to KUA to register their marriage. Some of them, they cannot go to Hajj, even though they are Muslims. So the law, it's very much related to the day-to-day life, even to, yeah, a child being born in Ahmadi community, woman and a boy and a girl falling in love, and then they want to get married, but then they cannot get the certificate for marriage. So it's real. It's not only about regulations issued by Bupati or whatever. It's also about, yeah, about praying, the freedom to pray, about going to school, about falling in love. Yeah, I hope I answer your question with some of these illustrations.
Let me add that, Zain.
Yeah.
So actually, the law is there to show that your rights, including your rights to religion, your religious freedom, is protected. That's the very core. But I mean, so you have the law in your case study. If you want to write something and you see any case of religious violations or so, you can say that we have the rights to religion that being protected by the law. So the law is there in your analysis to help you claim your rights. But there's an important things that human rights does not protect religion. Human rights protect human, not religion. This is the issue of blasphemy law, because blasphemy law protects religion, while human rights protect human. So in a sense, that blasphemy law violates human rights of the minorities, because the blasphemy law actually says that you cannot, in the Indonesian context, the law is there to protect religion from being defamed or blasphemed. So in the Indonesian context, Shia Ahmadiyya are perceived to be deviant sects, and then they were prosecuted under the blasphemy law. So the blasphemy law is actually limiting religious freedom. In my thesis, I say that you cannot say that blasphemy law protects religion is part of human rights, because human rights protects human. So there lies the constructions that actually blasphemy law attack your religious freedom, and it should not be justified to excess. But then if you look at the constitutional quotations on it, it is very political, but that's also an interesting thing to see. And then Ture, I think was it next week, we'll talk about how religion can also have perceptions about human rights. This is the second thing that you also need to see in the relationship between religion and human rights. I, as a legal scholar, see that human rights protects individual rights to have religion. Okay, not that human rights protect religion, that's a different things. And then Ture will see how religion also have conceptions of human rights. He will talk about the root of universalism from lots of religions, including Islam. So I amaze myself when I see Ture. Ture is actually a Christian, but he will talk a lot about Quran. He read that as a philosopher. So he found that a lot of Quranic verses that have religious freedom and human rights spirit in it. And then he also find it in other scripture, in holy books, other religious holy books. And then he conclude that human rights are universal in terms of religious perspective, because religions also have human rights. But of course, I will say, criticizing him, he was my former supervisor. I say that's a very good thing, Tura. But if we talk about religion, there are also interpretations of religion, and some of these interpreter of religions also have their own interpretations to against human rights, or to against tolerations of different religion, and that is also a problem that you could also discuss with Tura next week. Thank you, Pak Zain.
Okay, thank you, Arum. Okay, more questions? I hope you have a chance to look at Google Classroom. You can read the syllabus there. I will also advise you to look at some of the readings. I put all the readings, or almost all the readings there, so you can jump from one week to another to get a better idea about the course. Okay, any other questions or comments before we close the class?
May I, Pak Zain?
Yes, Heri, please.
Okay, I think in our syllabus there are not included about the deadline for midterm and a final assignment.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll think about it later. Yeah, I haven't put the deadline for that. But yeah, I think for the midterm, usually, well, maybe in the 7th or 8th after the 8th meeting. And then, yeah, okay, I'll look at the date. If there's no other questions or comments, I would like to remind you, because we have 2 classes in a week, so the next classes will be the day after tomorrow, and there's already the reading for Thursday class. There's the video of lecture by Brett Scharf, who will be with us. And then there's also the video, the documentary about the making of Universal Declarations of Human Rights, which I want you to also watch. It's a 50 minutes documentary. The lecture, I think it's an hour or almost an hour. So you will need at least 2 hours to watch it. You can watch it before you go to sleep. And the other one, oh yeah, don't forget you start to submit the weekly assignments tomorrow. And I hope you will submit it. Usually I put the deadline as 9 p.m. A day before, but for tomorrow, I hope you can submit it a bit earlier, so I can send it to Brett, and then Brett can respond to the question. So like in the previous semesters, the meetings on Zoom will be all about questions and answers, and the lecture will be recorded. I hope I can do it for the whole class. Yeah, the assignments are easy, right? I mean, you just write questions. So you're not supposed to give answers, but questions, but quality questions, and that's why you have to read it first. Oh yeah, for the WhatsApp class, Arum, you mentioned there's already a group, WhatsApp group. Is it? Do we have it?
Yeah, and Harry is the admin, so Harry, could you invite Pak Zen as well?
Okay, yeah. Okay, so we can continue the discussion there. Okay, so I have a chat from Sister Ines. Yes, okay. I can send you the link, Sister Ines, and then you can join. Okay, so any addition, Arum?
I think that's it for now.
Yeah, okay. So a good start, I think, today, and see you again the day after tomorrow, also with Brett Scharf. Okay, see you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Pak Zain.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mbak Arum.
Thank you, Pak Zain and Mbak Arum.
Thank you, Pak Zen and Mbak Arum.
See you on Thursday. Bye.
Bye.